All right, we are back for our last session today. Happy LSW20, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is a session on mental fitness and finding joy and contentment in times of crisis. And boy, if there is not a better topic for this moment, I don't know what is. We are joined by Jeff Kinsey. He has just some incredible experience building organizations, and he aligns business models to purpose and supports leadership development, and he has a great perspective on these topics. So at any point, if you have questions or comments, please drop them in the chat. We'll get to them later in the presentation. And but for now, Jeff, I'm just going to turn it over to you, and thank you for being here.
Great. Thanks so much, Morgan. Really appreciate Long March Startup Week. I love it. And I'm sorry that we can't all be together this year, but it's really nice in this virtual world to be able to offer, all these different kinds of sessions, and that people have this opportunity to view them instead of having, maybe to travel, from all parts of the state into Longmont to try and make it happen. So I really appreciate the opportunity. And, being the last session on a Friday for Startup Week is an interesting place to be. So we used to say that, I'm between you and your next drink. So I'll try and get through this as best I can. Like Morgan said, my name is Jeff Kinsey. I run the Logos Group, which is a consulting and coaching firm out of Boulder. And I really help people understand the true nature of thought and how they make meaning out of their experience. And that's what I'll be talking to you about today. Pretty heavy topic, really, when it comes down to it, especially since, the intellect tends to get in the way as we talk about things like mindfulness. I've given this presentation a couple times in a couple different formats. I would typically start out talking about how, the illusion of the American dream that I followed for 20 years as a banker, and how when I realized that that wasn't really true for me, that I had a bit of a midlife crisis and got a little suicidal about it. And, though I understand that can be COVID related, I really wanted to do this from more of a COVID specific perspective. That said, if anybody out there is feeling like they're just so overwhelmed with what's going on right now that they could really use some help, that they're, having suicidal thoughts, please reach out to somebody that's, an expert in that field and take care of yourself, because that's a short-term thing. It's one thing that I've learned through my experiences that is resolvable. It's short-term, and that life on the other side of that experience can be really quite wonderful. So I wanted to kick this off with a little bit more of a COVID-friendly or COVID-specific type of example. And I had put that out to the universe a few days ago. And of course, when we pay attention, the universe tends to respond. It might not be in the way we thought it would come, but it does. And that certainly happened for me. A couple days ago, I was coming off of a day of 4 hours straight Zoom calls. I'm sure many of you can identify with that. I was in the process of playing hide and go seek with a number of different new business opportunities. Over there, nope, it's not over there. Over there, nope, it's not over there. I imagine many of you can identify with that as well. And then all of a sudden it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had no idea what we were going to do for dinner. So my wife suggested that we go into town, which for us up here in Netherlands means there's maybe 2 or 3 places that are COVID friendly enough to attend. We called up a buddy of ours and we went into town. Now, the stress that I had experienced throughout the day, and then the stress of being outside in a COVID world was on, well, let's say it had my mind spinning. We had a pretty nice dinner. I was fairly distracted. I can't say that this webinar helped much, knowing that this was out here. But we, through the course of the conversation, that I wasn't really participating in much. My friend had mentioned that he had recently got a permit from the U.S. Forest Service to go out and cut down some trees. And my wife thought it was really funny to suggest that maybe he could come over to our house and cut down a bunch of our trees. And without really paying much attention to what I was doing and where I was, I struck out at her in a pretty mean way. And to say that dinner ended right then and there is an understatement. It was a very quiet ride home, and we didn't spend a lot of time together that night. So, all of this has to do with, really, this is what I do for a living, but I still, in the moment of some stress and anxiety, struggled to be able to pull myself out of my out of my thoughts, out of my intellect, and be able to really address the situation in a place that I think I have this particular expertise in. So, I'm with you guys. I totally understand what it's like to deal with the stresses that we have now, especially since they are relatively unusual on top of what the usual stresses were. So, like I mentioned, this is a fairly heavy topic, and it involves a different part of us than we're used to dealing with. We like to solve problems with our intellect, and that's a really important thing for us, but it's not always appropriate and applicable. So what I like to do is use metaphors, really. And, I think we're all fairly familiar with at least the metaphors or the concepts from a physical fitness perspective of speed, agility, balance, and mobility. So what I'd like to do is talk about those things, give you a little bit of, share some understanding about what those mean in a physical fitness perspective, talk a little bit about how that works with the mind, relate that to maybe a COVID example, and then give you some, a story from my own personal experience to sort of help resonate what these concepts are for you guys. So the first one here is speed. And I think oftentimes when we think of speed, we think of, achieving some maximum speed, especially in the sporting world. Now, we're always trying to get faster because faster is what wins. But this isn't really about getting faster. This is about understanding the equipment well enough to where you can adjust your speed in the moment to match the need of the moment. So a good example for me here is cycling. I hope and imagine that most of us have ridden a bike in our lives a couple of times, or taught somebody or watched somebody or something to that effect, to where we share an understanding of how a bicycle works. Most of them have gears on them. They've got brakes, they've got pedals. And by learning how to ride a bike, we learn how to use those different components and pieces of equipment on the bike so that we can really adjust our speed in the moment for the conditions, situation that we're in. When we're heading up a hill, we'll downshift so that we can climb a little bit easier. We get up to the top, we shift back up again, go down the other side. We use our brakes to slow us down if we need to. But this all happens fairly naturally because we understand how to use the bicycle in a way that matches the speed for the need. So the same thing happens with our minds, and all of our minds really work in the same way. We have, the circumstances that we make, that we experience, and then we make meaning out of those experiences through thought. And there's this relationship going on between thought and consciousness and how we deal with those thoughts. A good way to look at this from a COVID perspective is really just stress. When we start to feel stressed out, we can get attuned to feeling our mind speed up. And in that situation, it's very difficult for us to make real healthy situations. So what we don't always understand is that we have the ability at any point, as we recognize those thoughts, to really let them go by. So that as we feel ourselves speeding up, we can let a thought go by, it balances back out, we take a deep breath, and we slow down. And over time, you can get accustomed to that interaction within your thoughts and your mind and your consciousness, to where you can adjust your speed of thinking in the moment so that it's appropriate for what you're doing. I'd like to use an example of a box of pictures. My wife had taken a sabbatical a couple of years ago and went up and lived in Alaska for 6 months. And when she moved up there, took all the stuff that she thought she needed with her. It turns out she forgot a few of the pictures of our children from when they were little. Because I live in fire country up in the mountains outside of Boulder, it wasn't long after we moved in and got evacuated for our first time that we put all of our most precious belongings into boxes in the garage so that we'd be prepared to move out the next time the fire came. And what that meant was we hadn't seen pictures of our children for almost 15 years from when they were really little. So I went out and I pulled this box out to find a couple of pictures of the kids for my wife. And as soon as I opened the box, I just broke down into tears. I didn't feel like I had any control over it. And this didn't feel fun. It wasn't something I wanted to do. And I had already started to put the box back together and put it away. And I was ready just to go tell my wife, sorry, I can't do it. But then I remembered that I have this ability to interact with my thoughts and let them go if I want to. So I opened the box up again, and I just kind of let that pain go by. And with tears streaming down my face, I had the most enjoyable time looking at these pictures of my children. It makes me emotional now, remembering that feeling. Looking at these pictures of our children when they were little, and maybe 20 minutes or so, I just kind of went through the box and kind of just really enjoy the experience. And then I started to hurt. My heart started to hurt a little bit, and that was another indicator to me that I was done. And I just closed up the box and I put it away. And I was just so grateful that I had that skill set to be able to really just adjust the speed of my thinking and emotion in the moment and stick with it and really have that fantastic experience. So then the next concept is agility. And, the way I like to think of agility from a sports perspective is, these tire drills. And you might see, football players in practice will run through these tires. They set up a series of tires and you're supposed to run through and put each foot into one tire. And that helps build agility. And what that really means is, as you're trying to do this and getting better at it, you get tripped up. I mean, it just happens. You catch a toe on the tire coming out. You maybe hit a heel on the tire going in. And what you learn is how to react in the moment to be really responsive to that circumstance in and of itself. And that also applies to the mind. Once you have this awareness that this is how the mind works, to where you experience a circumstance, and then you generate your mind creates thoughts that are around that and feelings that are around that. You can welcome that feeling in, whatever it is in the moment, and you can decide what that's going to do for you. This isn't about pushing feelings aside, stomping on feelings, suppressing feelings, anything like that. Feelings are your friend. You welcome them in, you see what it does for you, and then you can decide whether you want to continue on with that thought stream or whether, you just don't really want to go there. Let that thought go and move on with your day. You can be agile in the moment, depending on how you make meaning out of those thoughts that are going through your head. I think from a COVID perspective, I talked a little bit about the stress and the busy mind. Your mind on thought is a dangerous thing in a way. As it spins around and these things add up in this busy mind, there's no room in there for fresh thought. You can't really come up with a solution when your mind is just churning away. So you need to be agile enough to recognize that that's happening, to sort of step back from it a bit, take a breath is the best way to do it, and sort of let your mind clear. And when your mind clears and you're calm, that's where fresh thought comes in. So to be able to recognize that in the moment and to be able to make that adjustment to where you can let fresh thought come in, it gives you the opportunity to be, really responsive and be able to deal with the situation in the moment. I think for me, I see this so regularly with my coaching practice, where I'm listening very deeply to a client as they're telling me a story, and invariably at some point within that story, they'll say something. My intellect will grab onto that. It'll do its analysis and computation, which is so good at, and it'll give me something to say. But I recognize as that's happening that my connection with my client is moving away. So I just am able to let that thought pass. I'm not going to make that comment right now. And it's really interesting. I sort of see it kind of leave my head. It's amazing. And then I feel that connection come back close again. And I'm able to be there with my client in the moment. And what I've discovered is that my client will continue talking. I'll just be deeply listening in a real strong connection. And then when they're done, when they finish their thought, I'm in a nice, clear, calm place. And just the perfect thing for me to say comes to me. And I say it. And we're all excited and happy. And we move on from there. It's really fantastic. So the next concept is balance. And, balance is easy enough, right? I mean, you think, we all live on this planet. We stand upright. We have to have balance in order to do that. My favorite sports analogy with regards to balance is yoga. because I tend to struggle regularly with yoga. To me, the people that are good at it have this most incredible sense of balance that when they start to get off just a little bit, they're able to pull that back. They have this innate balance feeling within them. That's such a wonderful thing. And, we have that balance mentally as well, where when we step back from our thoughts, we have this innate sense of well-being that's always there. We just don't always know how to access that, or probably more appropriately, we don't even know that we have the ability to access that. So just knowing that you have this innate inner balance, that's this mental health, to where you can take a breath, let the thought go by, and it automatically brings you back into this wonderful place. With regards to COVID, I think about, I talk a lot with my clients about the overwhelm that they experience. A lot of people bring these situations, but they're so overwhelmed with what they're doing, and we start talking about, well, what is that overwhelm made up of? And they start talking about work and family and the world, and to me that's like a balloon, right? You start off with an empty balloon, and every one of those things, you just blow more air into that balloon, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You don't recognize that you're filling that one breath at a time. You just see this giant balloon out in front of you, and all you have to do is let it go. All of that goes away, and you innately come back to this inner balance that you have within you and that we all have within us. For me personally, I actually wrote a LinkedIn article not long ago about my first mountain bike ride of the season. I live here in the mountains because I'm a mountain biker, and that's how seriously I take it. And as a result, I'm not too bad at it. And I like to ride really technical stuff where balance is really important. But that balance comes on a seasonal basis, where I have to ride a few times every year before I really get that balance back. So I just happened to notice this season, the first ride I did, I was just cruising along and I wasn't paying much attention to what I was doing. I got sort of off track on the trail I was riding, and my handlebars started to jerk. And normally I would feel like I'm falling, and that's terrifying in some cases. And I would go through a little panic mode about what I was going to do about it. But even though this was my first bike ride of the season, I had been really working on my mental balance, been coaching a lot, been thinking a lot, been riding a lot, and I didn't panic at all. And it was an interesting experience for me to be aware of the fact that my mind was totally calm, totally balanced, as my body was going unbalanced. But because I didn't interact with it intellectually, the handlebars, I just watched the handlebars straighten out in front of me, and I just continued on a straight path. And I just thought, that was so cool. I actually had to stop and giggle to myself about what had just happened. So that's, this balance that you have available to you, that is very similar to the balance we have, physically when we start to fall over or trip or whatever that is. So that brings us to this final concept of mobility. Mobility to me is being able to go anywhere, do anything. And you need to have a certain amount of skills in order to go anywhere and do anything. And from a sporting perspective, I look at something like the Spartan Games or the Tough Mudder events, where you start off at a starting line and you just start running, and you don't know what's going to be in front of you. Maybe you're climbing a wall, maybe you're running through some of those tires I mentioned before, maybe you're diving into the water. Who knows? But you need to be in the position where you can be mobile in that moment and do whatever it is that's out in front of you. So, mentally, the way I look at that is, we have this unlimited capacity. When you step back into that place of consciousness, anything can come to you in that space. You're not restricted by what you can think, right? By what you can calculate or analyze within your intellect. You're really open to just the energy of the universe that's coming into you, like me putting that out there and then having this not so great experience with my wife that ended up being so helpful in the end. We've always, in our society, we talk about how success is the function of capacity plus effort, right? You either it's a matter of skills plus the effort that you put into it. And if you're not being successful, that means you either need to increase your capacity by learning something more, or you need to try harder. And, through working with clients who have maxed out their capacity and maxed out their effort and are still not happy, that equation doesn't really work. So the equation that I do like and that I do think works is that success is a matter of infinite capacity minus the interference, minus the noise that's going on in the world. If you're able to get out of your intellect, get out of your thoughts, and just be present in that infinite capacity without any of that interference, you have the ability to be the happiest, most successful person you can possibly be. When I look at that from this COVID world, it's just its ability to handle this sort of day in the life, right? Your day is full of meetings and calls and emails and family, watching the news, trying to figure out if your kids are going to school, not going to school, going to school, who knows what's going on. And to be able to be mobile, to be able to be aware and in a place of contentment in and out, because we know how this all works, then you're able to be mobile throughout your daily lives. The way that has really resonated with me is, again, after this 20-year banking career where I was done and I didn't know what I was going to do, I realized that world was all about achievement, right? It was all about working harder, learning more to be successful. And it just wasn't working for me. So when I was able to back away from that and learn sort of the true nature of thought and how I make meaning out of my experiences and how to open myself up to all of the infinite capacity and wonderful things that are in the world, I realized that what I really love to do is teach, to help people move through difficult situations and come out better on the other side. And I've been able to build my business that way, even under COVID. I help, companies get through difficult times and executives get out of stressful lives. So it's a really important time for me to be out there. And because I, am able to adjust my speed, I'm agile in the moment. I have this innate balance that I understand. I can be very mobile out in the world and just kind of take whatever comes my way. So what, right? So here's some takeaways. It's really all about awareness. There's when you are aware, you're in a present consciousness. You're not trapped in your head, either remembering something that happened, maybe regretting something that happened before. You're not looking out at the future, worried about what might happen, thinking about that kind of thing. You really are present. And in that presence is where life is truly lived. It's not regretting or worrying, it's in the present. So welcome those feelings in as you have them. Figure out what that underlying thought is that caused that. It's not always what you might have thought it was, and follow those feelings and just be present, and spread the word. As you maybe play with this awareness and letting thoughts come and go and trying to maintain a balance and stay mobile, share that experience with others so that they have that same understanding that you do. It really is, within an organization, a key to team performance is having this common language and understanding amongst you. And never forget that you're human. We are this fallible organism that is doing something way beyond what we had originally evolved to do. And the stuff that we do in this world is really funny. So laugh at yourself. Don't beat yourself up. That self-hate, self-talk thing is just, there's no reason for it. Let those thoughts go. Laugh at yourself for being human. You end up laughing a lot, and that's a great way to go through life. So the end of the story of my dinner with my wife is that, the next day when we were both in this place of calm, clarity, and I was very apologetic about being such a jerk the night before, we started talking a little bit about what it was that actually happened. And I realized that when she offered to my friend to come cut down our trees, that she was giving up my trees without asking me for it. So I had this really weird attachment to my trees that came out as just a really mean thing that I said to her that didn't sound like that at all. But in that place of consciousness and just calm clarity the next day, we were able to have a really nice discussion about where that came from. And through that conversation, following the feeling, following the thought, I realized that I felt like somebody was giving away my trees. And we both laughed about it because it was hilarious in the end. So I think I probably ran through that pretty quick. I'd love to open it up to questions, Morgan, if there's anybody out there even listening. I can't tell from here.
Yeah. Yes, there are people listening and watching. If you do have questions for Jeff, please just drop them in the chat. One thing, first of all, thank you. That was an amazing presentation and conversation. One question that I had, or that came up for me, is I feel like I know some of these things, or I've heard some of these things before, but I think myself and many others struggle to kind of reconnect with them on a daily basis or on a regular basis, and maintain that perspective, or even integrate that perspective. So do you have any tips or advice about how we can more thoroughly integrate that wisdom into our daily lives?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and it's a regular question. It reminds me of people that go to yoga and people that go to meditations, and you can be there looking around and wondering why everybody gets it but you, and wondering how now what you're going to do about that. So I talk to people about having that experience off the cushion. How can I have that without sitting on this cushion in a nice quiet room or something
right.
like that. And it really is about awareness and an understanding of how the mind works. So, again, a circumstance, you experience that circumstance, your intellect creates a thought around that circumstance, and then you get to decide whether you're going to follow it down that track or not. And knowing that that's how it works and being aware of how that works, then you can actually sort of play with how these thoughts are going through your head, and decide at any point whether you're going to engage with that thought or not. How seriously are you going to take that thought? So that, to me, it's just kind of remembering that it's about awareness, and through awareness, it brings you right back into the present moment.
That's awesome.
Hope that helps.
Thank you. I think that's something that showed up this morning in some of our other sessions with other questions that were being asked. There was a lot of it's good to know it's not just me, and it's just bringing ourselves back to that fundamental practice of awareness and reconnecting with presence in the moment. Definitely.
And that can happen at any time with any thought that we have. It's through that awareness you recognize it, and that's the magic and the beauty of it. Really is recognizing that and deciding what to do about it. Granted, your ego is this bastard that just grabs on anything that you feed it, and you might end up spinning for a little bit before you realize what's going on. But honestly, letting the next one go, taking a breath and sitting back, telling the ego just to go mind its own business, you're now in a better place.
That's hilarious. I love that. Thank you. All right. Well, I will say I so appreciated your wisdom, and thank you so much for joining LSW 20 this year, Jeff. It was such a pleasure to have you and for you to share. I don't see any other further questions on this session, so it sounds like, or it must be, that everybody wants to get to their drink on this Friday afternoon and want to finish.
Well, I'm glad I finished early.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Morgan. Really appreciate what you're doing for Longmont.
Oh, well, thank you. All right, everybody. Happy LSW 20.